Hello, everyone. Vincent is back, and I'm here to share my story about my journey out of the Watchtower Society and how I became a follower of Christ. And I'm so excited to continue on in my testimony with as many people as I can. Well, what are we going to talk about today? Well, let's just get with it. Uh, you know, a few videos back, I was talking a lot about grace. And of course, that was when I already became a follower of Christ. And I was so excited to learn about God's grace. And it has changed my life completely. It's changed my view of God, it's changed my view of myself. It has just done wonderful things. I could never go back to the old way. To me, it's so clear what the scriptures teach on this. But now I want to go back further. We're going to continue on in my chronological order of events and how this led up to me being a follower of Christ. Now, it's been a while back, but I had a video called The Haunting. And if you remember right, I was very much into my spiritism and my tarot cards and all sorts of dark things. And I loved that stuff. Well, one day, and I'm just giving a quick recap of what I talked about before, how my wife bought a picture of Jesus, an artistic rendering of Jesus. I hung the picture up, and I continue on with my spiritism. And then finally, just one day, I kind of looked at the picture and I said, okay, I'm done. Reveal yourself, if you remember, right? That's what I mentioned before. And then I said a prayer and I wanted God to reveal himself. So I watched a video about Jesus, and this pastor didn't do anything for me. And so that's basically what I told God. This does nothing for me. I need more. Well, what happened next? I did not really connect it with God until much later. What happened was, and I'll just give a quick summary of what happened, and that is this. God, remember, I didn't put this all together till later. God did not reveal himself directly to me. What God did, and obviously it's for good reason, God revealed to me the devil. How did that come about? Well, this is how it all got started. I received a phone call a few days later, and the person on the phone said, "Do you believe in evil?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I believe in evil." "I mean, do you believe that true evil exists?" And I said, "Well, yeah, people do evil things." He says, "No, I mean, do you believe that there are ones on earth that are here for the purpose of being evil?" And so, what that led into was a conversation about something that many people already know about. They already know the subject, and that had to do with the New World Order. That subject was one that began to fascinate me because what I began to learn, what he was trying to explain to me, and what I continued to learn about later was that since the beginning of time, man has been leading to a new world order. That is, one world government, one currency, and one world religion. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's just conspiracy. It is because they have not researched this enough. And I just want to say it was very difficult for me to put this video together. That's why it's been a while since I put out a video, because I really didn't know how to present this. Uh, I want to give my testimony and I want to speak about the things that really affected me, but I don't want it to detract. I'm not here to talk about the New World Order necessarily. But I do need to mention these things because these things did not immediately wake me up to the God of the Bible, but it did wake me up to spirituality. So I am going to just give a brief Matrix 101, I guess you could call it. And then maybe in my next video, I will talk about some of the things that specifically affected me and really sealed the deal for me, you could say. So what happened was I began to learn about how our entire life is one big construct. We are truly in a matrix, and the expression all the world is a stage is very literal. And we also hear expressions like the theater of war. It is very literal. Everything in my life, I began to learn, was fake. All of the major world events, all of the major world events that the media presented was fake. And what do I mean by fake? I mean it is completely orchestrated, and everything is done either as a distraction from what they're really doing, moving ahead with their new world order, putting all the chess pieces in place. And that's what all of these events are. So I began to study big T events, such as 7/11. Yeah, you heard me right on that. And I began to learn that all things are just orchestrated. And that was one major one, so that we could head towards that new world order in a fast way, I guess you could say. It really set the stage for moving ahead with their goal. So I began to learn all of these things, but I went beyond just learning about events and how these things went down. I also began to learn, and I've read many books on this, how they've created even my entire life, my whole existence, all of my thoughts, all of the sentimental feelings that I have, all of the music I enjoy, everything is a construct. One podcast at the time I was listening to, and I love these two researchers. They really go deep into their subject, and I actually recommend that you subscribe to this channel. Now, normally, I would not recommend certain things, but Crow 777, he has a website, hundreds of videos, and these researchers, they go into things such as decades. And you know how if you're in this country, things are clearly marked. You had the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and 80s, and each decade has specific characteristics to it. But it was highlighted how in nature, we don't see that. Nature does not recognize decades. However, you can see stark differences because those things are not natural. They were never natural. The type of music we listened to, the type of food we ate, the type of movies we watched, they were all by design. I was thinking about the 80s because that was my generation. And they used to have like the top 10 music. Well, none of that was real. The top 10 and top 20, whatever music was out there, it was to create your life. I mean, that's why when you get to a certain age, or if you were a teenager in the 80s or the 70s, you still live back there with your music, with the movies. And you can tell it's all by design because look at the 80s. What the 80s was about was partying, having a good time. Everything seemed real, in the world. We were moving into technology, and you can really see that. We started having movies about robots, and we had they introduced the synthesizer to a lot of music. Their entire groups would have an entire album based on the synthesizer. We were starting to use computers at school. That was the early age of technology for the average person, and it was a time of having fun. Even horror movies weren't necessarily scary for a lot of people. It was a dark comedy. Yeah, there were certain things about my decade you could see that was clearly different than from the 70s, the 60s, and the 50s. That is because everything is a construct. Tavistock, if you know anything about that, it is a construct. Everything is fake. And remember, I mentioned these big T events. People say, oh, that can't be true. Yes, it can be true, because if you study history, the Romans, they did exactly that. They would create they would kill their own people. They would create some type of destruction over here, and they would call it something, but they were actually doing it on their own people. Everything was a construct. And that's the way it's always been. So I was learning about all these different things. And like I said, I don't want to detract because I'm not here to talk about these things, but this was really beginning to open my mind to what is really going on. I began to think that there's something greater going on. It's not just what we see. I've been taught that I am just a meat suit here on a rock floating in space, but that's not that's not how the world was operating. It was operating on some larger spiritual level, and they want to take us to this new world order. So I was learning all of that. I also learned about the educational system, how that too is a construct. Everything we learn in school, you're not learning, you're being told what to think, what to feel, and you're learning what they call truth. In fact, most of education today is not even beneficial. I mean, I think about all the things I've learned since I was a kid, and most everything I know was from reading other books and other publications. It wasn't from the classroom necessarily. So that entire thing is a construct, and that's what the Truman Show was really about. How our entire life is a construct, yet all of us can be a true man. However, most people are not. They're trapped in the matrix, and they think that they're making their own decisions, and they think all of their feelings are real, but everything is simply a construct. I mean, even when it comes down to our meals, just breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that too is a complete construct as well. You know how people always talk about their front yard, the backyard, all of that's a construct. People didn't talk about those things back in the old days. You see how this works? Every big event, right down to the smallest thing, is an absolute construct. It is fake. It is not organic at all. And so I began to learn all of this, as I said, and I know it feels like I'm all over the place right now because I'm trying to help you see that I was truly waking up. I didn't just accept all of this. I did deep research into it. I've listened to many podcasts, and I'm going to talk about some of those things in my next video because right now I'm just giving an overall, summary of what woke me up spiritually. And about this time, as I continued studying these things, it really was a spiritual awakening because I began to feel that nothing in life was really important. Uh, Material things completely lost their importance to me. It didn't mean I didn't enjoy some new things, but it just didn't mean the same thing anymore to me after learning this because now, it's one thing to learn about what's happening, but then why? Why is it happening? Who's behind it? And how can just an average person, how can average people accomplish such grand things? And why would they want to move us to this new world order of absolute control? Uh, those were questions I had once I started learning all of these different things. I mean, I learned even about history. Most of history is a lie. I think Napoleon said that history is a lie repeated. I mean, even that statement's probably a lie. I mean, everything, even things that I learned in school, like in elementary or middle school, they don't even teach some of that stuff in school anymore because it was a lie. It was made up, and the story has changed since then. One of those has to do with Columbus discovering America and all of that. I mean, there's everything is just. I mean, even science. What do we know about science? Everything that we really know is presented to us on the screen, on the TV. They tell us what to think and how to feel. It's just like being educated in school. I mean, I can go on and on and on about these things, but I just wanted to mention a few of these things just to help you to see that I was beginning to wake up spiritually, seeing how grand these events are. Well, then going back, remember how I said I wanted to know why this was happening. I wanted to know more about the controllers. All right, so now I'm going to mention another channel on YouTube, and he's still around. He's still a big channel. I don't recommend him necessarily because, and I'll explain that probably a little bit more tomorrow, but he is a former priest to the Satanic Temple, and he's no longer that now. But he is a master, you could say, of the occult. He's a master of uh, the anything connected with the occult and satanic rituals and all of that. And he can see all of the symbolism, all of the signs. He can see the gematria in this world. He can see how all of it's at play right now with the New World Order. And so I began to learn a lot from him about the type of ones that are controlling our world. I began to learn that, And this is a deep subject, but I'm going to just mention it here. And if you haven't studied the subject, you're going to think, oh man, this guy's crazy, but you need to study this because these things are real. He began to explain clearly that how this is being controlled is that it's through secret societies. And we hear a lot about that in connection with the New World Order. And that's really the way it's been. Historically, everything's been controlled through these mystery schools. And the ones behind the curtain, not the ones we see on the media, but the ones that are behind the curtain, I began to learn that these are black magicians and sorcerers. Now, before you think, well, that's just crazy, just look up black magic in the Wikipedia. It doesn't say it's fake. Black magic is real. It's when something, when they present to you something over here to distract you from what they're actually doing over here. Also, too, sorcerers that are running this world. Sorcery is real. So here's what they do. Now, in theosophy, and that's what this is based on, these Jewish mystery religions, that's what our entire world is being run by. And that's what he emphasizes, that it is religion that is behind everything that's going on. And these mystery schools, this religion, theosophy, as it's called, it has two types of theosophy. There's dark theosophy and there's light theosophy. Now, for a Christian, both are wrong, right? Both are wrong. However, putting that aside, what he was trying to explain is that we are being ran by dark theosophy right now. Dark lords, you could say. That's where all of this Star Wars comes from, forces of evil and the forces of good and all of that. It comes from these types of ideologies. Well, what sorcery is, so here's what they do. In Masonry or in theosophy, there's two types of thinking. They have what is profane and what is esoteric. Profane is the physical, it's the unimportant, it's the part that they want to present to us. They don't want to share the esoteric, the reality of something. For example, sorcery. So we are presented on the screen with like Harry Potter, right? Harry Potter we know is fake and all of that. So we look at sorcery, magic, and we think, it's not real. But when you read the Bible, you can see clearly the Bible talks about sorcery. The Bible talks about magic. And for a person who doesn't understand, even like myself in the Watchtower, I'm like, God talks like this stuff is real, yet did it really happen? Well, that's what he's explaining. Sorcery does not come from just average people thinking. It's an ancient art, and it's based on math, and we're talking about the most complex math ever. Basically, people can't really understand. It's based on a deep understanding of human psyche, science, and what they do in sorcery is when you have understanding of all of those things, you can not predict, but you can say this is going to happen in the future, and you can make it happen. And that's what sorcery is. And that is who is controlling our world. True sorcerers and true black magicians who present things and they have us believing something over here, but it's not really what they told us it was. They are actually doing something over here. Black magic. And it's black for a reason, because we're talking about the dark theosophy that is running our world. And so I was beginning to learn all of this, but was I necessarily becoming enamored with God? Well, not necessarily. I was waking up spiritually, but I almost got caught in that trap. Like, there is something going on here. And if something is going on and this theosophy is correct, I was starting to go in the way of, say, this Mark Passio, this channel I'm talking about. That's his name, Mark Passio. I began to start believing that maybe he's correct. Maybe this is deeper than we think. Maybe there is a type of theosophy that is good. And so I began to head that direction. So that all of this was, like I said, it was opening my eyes spiritually, but not necessarily to God. So now I mentioned all of these things. Again, I don't want to detract from my testimony, but these things were huge because I was beginning to see that there's something far greater going on than what we see and what the average people understands. So after that, I went deeper into the rabbit hole to learn about these things. Now, the question is, what kind of things really sealed the deal for me? What really helped me to see that, yes, something greater is going on and the New World Order concept is real and we are headed towards a world of tyranny? What is it that awakened me to the fact that, you know, this is what actually we are fighting against? We're in a spiritual war. And this is part of the spiritual war. They want to move us away from God, away from nature. They want to take us to a world that they create. How did all of this tie in with, say, the biblical view of Satan and the war that we are fighting? Well, later on, perhaps in my next video, I'm going to talk about some of the things, like I said, that sealed the deal for me and began to really awaken my understanding or view of God, or at least it began to make me think of God, at least in a small way. I'll share those things in my next video. Well, I'm sorry I sounded like I was just rambling, but these things are very important, because if it wasn't for this stage in my life, I probably would still be in my Spiritism. But I began to learn all of these things over a long period of time, and I truly studied these things. In fact, I have a flash drive. I downloaded historical videos, lectures, documents. I have so many videos just on that I've saved to help people understand this if they ever truly want to know what is going on in the world. Now, another, like I said, I don't recommend certain channels. Like I mentioned, Mark Passio, and I just want to say I don't listen to guys like that anymore, only because it was beneficial up to a point. But now he's really began to emphasize this move into what they consider good theosophy and how it can be used to change the world for good. So I don't recommend that. Plus, he's always cussing. I mean, I think he drops the F-bomb every 2 minutes. I would actually listen to this stuff at work, and people would look at me like, what are you listening to? This guy is screaming and saying the F word and all this. But at the same time, they would say, okay, it is very interesting what he is saying. And they would want me to explain what they were hearing. So actually, even though it didn't sound good, it helped me to explain these matters to people, many people at least. So I'm going to repeat it again. I don't want to detract from my testimony, but these things were very important. And so instead of just passing off everything that I said as trying to make you believe in what I believe, again, it's simply about me waking up spiritually. All right, we're going to conclude the video here, but in my next video, I want to, as I said, I'm going to mention some specific things that really, really helped me to see things a certain way. And it actually gave me goosebumps when I started learning certain things that are going on in this world. All right, until the next video, please like, subscribe, and share.